Demi's story began when she awoke after being unconscious for a long time. When she finally opened her eyes, she found herself completely alone on a small boat surrounded by an endless ocean. Terror filled her heart as she tried to understand what had happened, why she was stranded in the middle of the sea with no supplies at all. A few days earlier, Demi had arrived on an island. She didn't have a stable job. Her passion was exploring new lands and connecting with people wherever she went. She lived mostly on the kindness of strangers, doing small tasks in exchange for a few coins along her journey. That had been her way of life for as long as she could remember, to see as much of the world as possible before growing old, believing that money could come later. To her, life was meant for experiencing, not wasting. During her time on the island, she met a man named Richard, a local fisherman with many years of experience. They talked for hours, and eventually Richard invited her to dinner. That evening turned out to be unexpectedly warm and full of laughter. Demi was fascinated by his photos and travel stories. Like her, Richard loved adventure and had seen half the world. Sometimes she even felt jealous of his experiences, wishing she could see the world as he did. Richard told her about the dangers of the sea, the sleepless nights, and the constant struggle to survive. Yet, he said, it was all worth it. Those experiences gave life meaning and left no regrets. Inspired by his words, Demi declared that she wanted to join him on his next voyage. The next day, Richard took Demi out to sea, and together they began a new journey. Their bond grew stronger each day, and though neither said it aloud, it was clear they were in love. One day, a billionaire approached Richard with a special request. He needed someone to deliver his yacht to California, but had no skilled navigator. The pay was generous, and there was even a first-class return ticket. Richard agreed, but on one condition. He wanted 2 tickets so that Demi could come with him. When he told her about the opportunity, he said the trip would give them a chance to explore even more of the world together. At first, Demi hesitated, saying it was his job and that he should finish it quickly. But Richard gently replied that he'd sailed the world alone long enough, and since meeting her, he only wanted to share his adventures with her. Hearing those sincere words, Demi couldn't refuse. They received the yacht and set sail toward California. Both were excited. This would be their longest voyage together. Not long after leaving port, Richard confessed his love and proposed. Demi laughed joyfully, said yes, and hugged him tightly. But fate had other plans. Hours into their journey, Richard noticed a small bird flying nearby, unusual in the middle of the ocean. Suspicious, he scanned the horizon but saw nothing. Soon after, he checked the radio and heard reports of a massive storm moving directly along their route. It would strike within hours, far stronger than expected. They decided to change course to avoid it temporarily, but the storm intensified faster than they imagined. Enormous waves rose high enough to swallow larger ships. Their small yacht was battered relentlessly. Richard urged Demi to go inside the cabin for safety, but she refused, insisting she wanted to face everything with him. Finally, realizing the danger, Richard convinced her to go below deck. He stayed on deck to fight the storm. The wind howled and waves crashed violently until Richard was thrown overboard into the raging sea. Inside the cabin, Demi hit her head against the wall and lost consciousness as water flooded in. When she awoke hours later, the storm had passed, but Richard was gone. She screamed his name into the endless ocean, but no one answered. Her heart broke as she realized the sea had taken the man she loved. Days passed as Demi drifted in despair. She recalled Richard's words about adventure and survival, but never imagined they'd turn into a nightmare. With no rescue in sight, dehydration and exhaustion began to consume her. Somehow, she clung to life, collecting rainwater and trying to catch fish with makeshift tools. Then, a miracle, she spotted debris floating nearby, and on it, a familiar figure. Richard was still alive. She jumped into the water, swimming desperately toward him. But the current was strong, pushing her boat away. With a storm approaching again, Demi had to make an impossible choice: try to save Richard or return to the boat. She chose survival, returning to fix the yacht, then steering it back to him. When she reached him, Richard was unconscious, barely clinging to an overturned dinghy. She tied a rope around his chest and pulled him aboard with every ounce of strength left. His body was badly injured, his skin burned from saltwater exposure. She splinted his leg and tended to his wounds, but they were still stranded. Days passed and their supplies dwindled. Richard calculated their position. They had drifted far off course, trapped in a dead zone of the Pacific Ocean. Their only chance was to head toward shipping routes, though it might take months. With only a week of food left, Demi trembled and whispered, "Maybe we'll die here." But Richard, even broken, told her they couldn't lose hope. Then Demi had an idea. What if they sailed toward Hawaii? It was a desperate gamble, but it became their last hope. Richard reluctantly agreed and told her the hard truth. They would have to start catching fish to survive. Demi froze. She was a vegetarian and the thought made her sick. But survival left no room for beliefs. Under Richard's guidance, she tried to catch fish with her bare hands, but failed. Exhausted and empty-handed, she returned to the deck, despair mirrored in both their eyes. Days blurred together. Richard's condition worsened: fever, infection, delirium. One night, they spotted a huge cargo ship in the distance. They screamed, waved frantically, but no one saw them. The ship drifted away into the horizon, taking their last bit of hope with it. Richard collapsed. Demi held him as he slipped into unconsciousness. Then, as if mocking them, strong winds returned, but instead of another storm, they pushed the yacht forward. For the first time, fortune smiled upon them. But Richard's body could no longer fight. His legs had rotted, his wounds infected. Demi lay beside him, whispering words of love, unsure if he could hear. She told him about her childhood, her distant father, her lonely years, and how with him, she had finally felt whole. One morning, Demi awoke to find Richard gone. Only a piece of wood floated beside the boat. The truth struck like a knife. Richard had never truly been there. It had all been an illusion of her desperate mind. He had died the night the storm swallowed him. Destroyed by grief, Demi cried until no tears remained. Then came the silence, and with it, resolve. She could either surrender or live. Remembering Richard's words, "The sea respects those who respect it. Perseverance is stronger than strength." She chose life. She learned to catch and dry fish under the harsh sun, rationing every bite. Her lips cracked, her skin burned, but she endured. Then, one morning, a small bird landed on the boat. Birds don't fly far from land, hope surged through her. Peering through binoculars, she saw the faint outline of an island. With trembling hands, she steered the boat toward it, fighting wind and exhaustion. Each stroke was a rebellion against death. As the sun set, a massive shadow appeared, a Japanese naval ship. Demi summoned her last strength, stood up, and waved. This time, the sea answered her prayers. The sailors pulled her aboard, wrapped her in a blanket, and gave her water. As she told her story of love, loss, and survival, even the hardened sailors were moved to silence. Demi was finally saved. But escaping the sea didn't mean escaping her grief. When she returned to the island where she met Richard, memories flooded every corner. In his old house, surrounded by his photos, she collapsed in tears. She had loved two people in her life, and fate had taken them both. Yet in that pain, a new strength was born. Richard had once told her, "The world is too vast to give up. Life is an endless horizon." That night, standing barefoot by the shore, she held the ring he had given her, their promise of love. With trembling hands, she whispered, "Rest in peace. You'll always be in my heart," and let the ring fall into the sea. It wasn't a farewell, it was a gift of peace. And so, the chapter of Demi and Richard ended, but her story was far from over.